Hello everyone, welcome to what is probably your first video lecture. This is Miss Walker, and what we're going to be focusing on today is just getting a bit of a background piece before we really dive into biology. And so this particular video, in addition to maybe one or two others, is going to be focusing on the different processes of science. What makes science science? And for this particular video, we're going to be focusing on something called discovery science. And as far as note-taking goes, you should either be taking notes in your science notebook on page 3, and the goal is to only have one page of notes, or if you snagged one of the guided notes copies, you can take notes on there. And if you don't have that, it is available on Schoology. So with regards to discovery science, there are 3 goals that I am hoping to achieve by the end of this video that include the following. 1, you should be able to describe the nature of scientific inquiry. Now, I'm not looking for a giant book on inquiry, but you should be able to give me the gist. The second goal is that you should be able to compare quantitative and qualitative data and to also know the difference between the two, especially considering we're going to be doing quite a few labs, and we're going to come into contact with both of those types of data. And last but not least, you should be able to distinguish between observations and inferences, which hopefully you should be able to do already. All right, here are the 6 vocab terms we're going to be talking about today. These are available on your unit guide and also your guided notes. So without further ado, here we go. So biology, which is the title of the class, is essentially just the study of life. We're taking a look at everything and anything that is categorized as living. Well, what exactly is a living organism? What makes it living? We're going to find that out in another activity down the road here, because we're just focusing on discovery science today. So with regards to science, since biology is one of the branches of science, science is essentially a way of knowing and of answering questions that relate specifically to the natural world. And so it's essentially people asking why something is happening, or why something looks the way it does, or how does A affect B. All of these different questions that you could possibly think of typically will lead you towards science. Now with inquiry is essentially all about asking questions, and in science, we ask a lot of questions. In biology specifically, we're asking questions about what we observe in nature, so in natural surroundings, and we're actively trying to find answers to those questions. Now I do have a couple examples, one involving the plant picture you see on your screen. The first question that I might ask looking at that picture is, how do plants sense the direction of light? Like, how do they know which way to go or where the light is? Another question you might ask is, what enables plants to bend towards light as it grows? So for example, the plant probably looks the way it does in this picture because maybe it was in the pot sitting normally on a table, so this part of the pot that I'm pointing my arrow at was probably flat on the table, and then the plant grew for a little bit, and then maybe someone took the plant and turned the pot on its side. Well, why didn't the plant just keep going straight out? Why did it bend? So those are all examples of a curious mind, questions that scientists might ask, trying to figure out why something's happening the way it is with regards to the natural world. Remember that. So essentially, whatever you're curious about, that is the starting point for, learning more about you, about your life, about the world that you interact with. And besides asking questions, inquiry is involved in investigating. And so that's where the scientific method comes into play, and we're going to talk about that in a future video. And so inquiry is where it's at in the world of science. And inquiry usually involves observations. So we ask a question about something, while the very first thing we're going to do is observe our surroundings. So observations involve using your 5 senses to gather information. Sorry, it looks like some of my text got cut off there. So you're using your 5 senses to gather information. What do you see, hear, smell? Hopefully not tasting too many things. I don't know if you want to go out in nature and just put things in your mouth. That'd be kind of worrisome. But when you gather this information from your senses, you typically record it. And a lot of times when you record information, you're looking at, structures or processes or things that might help you answer your question. So whatever information you're recording, that is data. Data isn't just all about numbers. Data can include sketches. It can include descriptive information. Anything that you're using to help you answer your question is data. Now, I will say that's a little bit different than background research, but anything that you're compiling to analyze later is data. Much like you see in this picture here, our scientists are out in the field and they're collecting some sort of data. I can only guess what it is they're trying to discover, but you might have the opportunity to do something like that one day. So data comes kind of in two categories, quantitative or qualitative. Well, quantitative sounds like quantity. And so essentially, I'm looking at observations, and any observations that I record in the form of numbers, essentially measurements, is quantitative. So think quantity, number. Qualitative data, think quality of data. So this is where I record observations in the form of descriptions. And so to help kind of give you a visual between these two, I have a diagram here. And so qualitative is descriptive, quantitative is numerical. So if I were to say, I drink coffee every day, I am describing what I am doing. So another example of qualitative data might be if you were taking a poll and asking people their favorite colors. Well, your data might say the vast majority of people like the color blue. Well, that is an example of qualitative. Quantitative, on the other hand, includes numbers. And you'll see that there are two different kinds of numbers in that picture. Discrete numbers, those that are counted, so going 1, 2, 3, 4. So I drink 4 coffees every day. That's discrete, but it's quantitative because there's a number included there. Continuous or measured numbers are also examples of quantitative. So anything that you use a tool or a device to measure something, like a scale or a balance or a meter stick or a thermometer, that would give you a continuous number. So for example, I drink 80 grams of coffee every day. Well, that's still quantitative because there's a number. So hopefully you see the difference between those two. So Jane Goodall is the individual pictured here on the left. And maybe you've heard of her, but she is well known for studying chimpanzees. And she is an excellent example of a scientist who is all about discovering the unknown. No one really knew anything about chimpanzees before, and because of her work, the decades she spent out in the field observing these creatures, she is strictly observing. She is not interacting with the chimps in any way. But all because of her observations, she has been able to provide us with so much information, so much data about the structure of families in different chimpanzee groups, how they interact with each other, okay, how they care for each other, how they hunt, all kinds of information that we would have never known if she hadn't gone out and taken the time and the effort to learn about them. And so she is a model scientist when it comes to representing discovery science. With that being said, discovery science is the term we use to describe natural structures or processes as accurately as possible through careful observations and data collection. So essentially, we're trying to answer questions by using our observations and collecting data, all revolving around natural structures, so things out in the environment. Some examples include mapping human DNA. Now, yes, DNA isn't necessarily out in the environment willy-nilly, but it's something that we can study in the human body, in animals and plants. Okay. Another great example is this guy, Alexander Fleming, and he accidentally discovered penicillin. All because he was trying to answer a specific question and collecting data using his skills of observation, and he noticed something and it led him to his eureka moment. All right, So on one hand, we have observations, and with those observations, we can typically develop an inference. So an inference is, plain and simple, a logical conclusion based on your observations. In addition to using observations, though, you can also utilize your prior experience. Inferences are extremely important in the world of science because they help us kind of narrow down our ideas revolving around our initial question. So we can take a general question and whittle it down until it's very specific, and it helps us to further our exploration of what we're looking into. So in this picture, there's a lot going on. And so hopefully you're able to make inferences based off of what you see. So if you'd like to pause and kind of try your hand at making an inference, you can go for it. When you're ready, you can come on back and I'll make some inferences of my own. So looking at this picture, the first thing you have to do is kind of, make observations. And we kind of do that automatically just looking at this scene. So for example, I could say, well, I see a police car. I see a tow truck. This car has a crunched front end. The guardrail is on the opposite side of the highway. And so because of those observations, I can say, oh, it looks like there was an accident. I can also say, because there's an ambulance there, that maybe there was a fatality. Someone was killed, or maybe there was an injury. So that's just a really basic use of observation and inference, and we're going to be doing a lot of that in our labs and experiments. The last little piece I'd like to discuss is just about bringing all of this together. A generalization is a term that maybe you've heard before, but in science, we develop generalizations when we bring many observations together to reach a common idea, essentially a general conclusion, as you see there in quotations. So for example, a generalization might be all organisms are made of cells. Well, we didn't just come up with that idea right out of the blue. There was a lot of research done and many different questions that led to this idea because they were able to gather data. So observations, data from items that we collect via observations, inferences we make based on those observations and data, and then bringing all of that together to form generalizations, all work together to help us understand the complexity of life. And so hopefully, over the course of the year, we'll be able to help you do that in biology class. So I have a few questions for you. They are listed on your guided notes. If you don't have those, though, we can still go through these and see if you know your stuff. All right, which of the following is the best definition of science? So go ahead and pause, see if you can find the answer, and come on back. So the best definition of science is C, a search for answers to questions about the natural world. Hopefully you got that one right. This question is asking you to look at the diagrams I have here, both as a graph and a table, and to figure out which is representing qualitative data and which is quantitative. So maybe pause and see if you can figure it out, and then come on back. So the easiest thing for me when it comes to figuring out which is which, I always go to numbers first. So this one has numbers, yes, but the majority of the information is descriptive. All of the numbers up here, though, that makes me think that that is quantitative, and it is. All of these down here, though, the descriptions of each of the cubes, it's all words, so it's qualitative. So hopefully that helps you tell the difference. I believe that is all I have for you. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time.